Hey guys, welcome to another video here. Today I have a really exciting video for you guys, and today we're really gonna talk about my experience in architecture in the past decade. It's kind of funny. I've been looking at how long have I been doing architecture, and for the past, since last year, I've been doing architecture for the last 10 years, and I kind of want to give a little bit overview of what I think about the industry and kind of I see it moving along with AI and new technologies out there. And I just kind of want to give you an overview, my honest overview of what I think about architecture, what I would do if I were you, and I'll be graduating architecture or I will be already in the field. Now that I already have these last 10 years about being in the industry. And a little bit about myself was that I'm Ecuadorian and I came to the US mainly when I studied architecture. I came to also play tennis, and I studied in Missouri, Drury University, and I did my 5-year master's degree because at this point there's many architecture universities that actually offer a master's degree for 5 years. I know that some other universities are 4 years and then you get your master's degree for another 2 years. But I think the useful thing with this program was that it was just 5 years. There was no option for 4 years and a bachelor's. There was only an option of 5 years with a master's degree. So I studied architecture for the 5 years, and it was super fun. But of course, just like any other architecture program, my school was really focused more on the liberal arts. So a lot of the program was really about design, and it was a lot of focus on the representation of architecture. So many of much of my experience was really focused on the design and creating beautiful drawings and renderings, but without really focusing too much in the technical aspect of it. And so whenever I graduated, so there was we did a lot of projects that involved community projects, a lot of projects that were involved regarding the community in Missouri, but there were other projects that, for instance, in my last year, there were two programs when some of them went to New York, and then I think the other program went to Seattle, and it was pretty fun because you can get to choose. We also study abroad, so we get a lot of that culture. We went to Greece for semesters. It was great to kind of get a little bit about the culture and in that like classical architecture in there. So in general, it was a great experience. Do I think architecture, so starting with that, I think that architecture, when it comes to academics, should not be 5 years. I really think the program in architecture, like studying architecture, should not be more than 4 years, and that's already tops. Like, I feel like there's a lot of things to learn, but I think a lot of the things to learn, we're really gonna learn in the field. I think that a lot of the architecture practice in schools are really focused on projects that you are actually designing, and there's no really client, and you're not really working with a team. It's kind of like just by yourself most of the time. So I feel like by the time somebody graduates from architecture, they end up with the wrong mentality on how to start. Not, don't get me wrong, like it's great that you design and stuff, but the reality of architecture is that it's not quite like that. And then we're gonna kind of base more into that. But one of the things I kind of realized is like where I wish I could have paid a little bit less money in studying architecture and maybe just doing it like less, like in a 3-year, 4-year program rather than extending it for 5 years. And I know that in some ways it's useful because it helps you develop a better portfolio. But I think something that in the long run is more useful is to kind of get that more experience in the field rather than you just focusing more years in academics. But that's just my opinion. So starting with that, the second thing that in my experience was really hard to kind of do once I graduated from architecture once I graduated, I kind of telling you a little bit about my story was once I graduated, I stayed in Missouri to work there for a year and a half. After I kind of got tired of it, I was honestly not doing that well as an architectural designer. I was just very hard to get used to a 9-to-5 job. And from there, and at that point, you're still a kid. I was kind of still thinking, well, maybe it's architecture firms. Maybe there's not a lot of design companies here, so maybe I just want to go to California. And then it's when I went to California and I practiced there for about 3 years and a half. 3 years and a half, I was practicing in California until COVID happened. And call it a blessing or not, but when COVID happened, I got furloughed. I went to see my brother at that time, but I started pretty much in those 2 months. It really kind of helped me get a sense of what I really want, and kind of gave me that sense, okay, how can I plan my life so I kind of feel more secure, or can I, because I feel like whenever you have a job, you're 100% dependent on that without really developing skills for other things. So then is when I started to some friends contacted me to get some help with work, and that's how I became a consultant, pretty much just helping people with drawings and whenever they have a project, I will still do it in ArchiCAD, and that's kind of how I start kind of developing these little clients here and there that I kind of start kind of working online. And at that point, I started working back again in the company that furloughed me, but online. So at that point is when architecture became a lot more remote. Before, it was very difficult to get a remote work in architecture, but that was kind of that bridge to finally get remote work in architecture. Now, here's where it gets a little tricky, right? Because architecture, as kind of what we know it, it's very related to your location, right? Like, if you really want to practice architecture and expand your career, you really need to stay in that area to, because at that point, you're not just doing drawing, you're talking to clients. And at the same time, you have to be familiar with the local laws and go to the site meetings and everything like that. So as a general practice, you being able to do architecture in other parts, it's more difficult. But yeah, for the last 5 years, I've been working as a consultant. So half of my career was working in companies that were small to medium size, like 5 to 20 people. And then the other half of my career, I have been working as a consultant with clients that are companies between 10 to 20 people. So I have a good experience on kind of what's the average of, that normally architecture firms between 1 and 20 people are probably the backbone of the whole industry. Really, the BAGs and the Zaha Hadid and all that are really not that common. Like, the majority of the architecture firm, there are companies that are a little smaller than that, and there are a lot of really small studios that are like 5 to 10 people, or 5 to 10 to 20 people, but that's the majority of them. That's the reality. So I'm gonna kind of give you a more perspective coming from that field, where it's not the corporate level, but it's a level where I will say it's a more standard to architecture, not necessarily the corporate BIG or things like that. So that's kind of my perspective. But so the first thing that I see that happened to me was that it was very hard to, for experience in architecture, coming from, as I'm saying, this connection between the real field and the academics, is having to adapt to that 9 to 5 job. It's very hard at the beginning, because when you're in college, you have these breaks sometimes that are like 2 or 3 hours long. Or sometimes when you don't have those breaks, you're still kind of designing and doing stuff, but you're kind of doing on your own time and in the place that you want, and with music and everything, and that's great. But once you get to the office, it changes a little bit, because now you're working in an office environment where it's okay to listen to maybe a headphone here and there, depending on the office. But most of the time, it's not like you can be, being too obvious about it. You cannot just be putting YouTube on the side and just be clicking on videos, or, just exploring, spending like a few hours exploring and looking at other architecture design ideas or stuff like that. You have to be a lot more purposeful, and it's the 9 to 5. You get there, you already have like a few projects that the project manager or somebody else is gonna give you assignments to, and you have to sign a time card too. So you have to, keep working, and then you have your hour break. Now sometimes it's not even an hour break, and yeah, so that was very hard thing to adapt. So it's very, I will say, whenever in college, you try to start kind of getting something that could work, something similar to that, or later on, or where you are in your office. Something that has worked for me is that every hour I'll just kind of go and take a little 10-minute break where it's just for a walk or just even just stand up, go get a coffee or something, just or start just a conversation with someone regarding your life or a project, just something that is not sitting down doing the same activity, something that you can break a little bit of the pattern and make it a little bit more fun. So that's something that has helped me. I think a lot of that was difficult whenever I graduated or whenever I got my first years of experience, was dealing with people at the beginning, because I think you'll feel whenever you're in college, you're dealing with a lot of people that are your age. So it does feel a little bit, I don't know, you're a little shy at the beginning when you start dealing with people that are in their 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, to a point where like sometimes you don't know how to say no, right? So a project manager might ask you something or might give you an assignment, and you don't know how to say, not gonna say no, but you say, hey, how about we do this instead? Or how about, hey, I'm busy here, I can give you this tomorrow, or things like that. You just, at least for me, I was shy enough that I just couldn't like connect with the people that were a lot older than I was, because for the last 5 years, I was just pretty much talking to people that were my age. So I just couldn't relate. So something that I feel like it would be useful is like to start going to network events or anything, that just start getting used to talking to people that are more elder, that have more experience than you, but just getting more comfortable having conversations that are regarding business and things like that, rather than just having the college conversations where it's just about social lives and what are you going to eat today, but having more meaningful conversations regarding your career. For me specifically, there was a language barrier for me. So at that point, I had a really good level of English, but there's a lot of, in architecture, whether you're an architect, lawyer, or things like that, you start kind of getting more technical words that you haven't heard before because they're technical. So, and even sometimes, like, it was funny because not too long ago, my girlfriend was reading a recipe in Spanish. Like these fancy recipes, and I was reading the recipe in Spanish, and even I couldn't understand because there were a lot of these technical terms for cooking that I don't know anything about cooking. So for me, it was difficult to understand, even though I know the language. So I can relate to that. Like, if in English, sometimes there were these technical words that at this point they seem very normal, right? Like, for instance, just like even words just like the stud or gutter or downspout or things like that are things like somebody will think, yeah, those are basic words. But whenever somebody comes from another country, you're like, no many people use those words, right? Like, those words are just not part of conversation. So those are already technical enough that if you're talking fast and you're talking about these things, I automatically lost the sense of it, because I don't know what a downspout is. I don't know what that gutter is. So now I kind of lost exactly what you were talking about. And now imagine that, adding that to square inches and inches here, and then you kind of mix it with trusses and other technical words right there that at that point I was not used to. So I would think something like that, it could be just having someone like being honest and just saying, like, hey, could you explain to me this better? Or just saying, like, hey, I'm not 100% clear. Can I try to explain it back to you and see if and also just make them understand, like, hey, I'm sorry, I haven't heard this word before. I'm a little confused. So I'm sure at the beginning, people will understand, right? You coming from a different country or something. And even like that, even if you're not from a different country or anything like that, people will understand if you're like, will respect you more if you say, like, hey, I'm not clear. Can you explain me this back, or I just don't remember? Can we go through this together? And people, generally speaking, have the patience for that. So now that I have given you the things that I kind of struggle a little bit, and we have already on 15 minutes, I'm just gonna kind of finish the video. I'm gonna kind of create another series of the video, but now I'm gonna just give you my top 7 recommendations. And I already kind of touched base on that, but I'm gonna expand on those really quickly. And then I'll create another video on how the actual architecture industry is, and then how can AI help with that. But for now, I'm going to just keep this video as my introduction to architecture, my experience, and what my recommendations are. So I think the first thing really, I mean, if I can give somebody that is in the industry and is looking for advice, or is just starting and is looking for advice, I will say the first recommendation is just to try to learn as much as you can and try to expand on that. There's going to be a lot of things that are going to be thrown at you in architecture that could be gone everywhere, meaning it could be just regarding construction, materials, exploration, codes, zoning, design. There's so many things, and whenever you are in those first 5 years of experience, what you really want to do is try to be open to everything and try to learn as much as you can and try to expand on that. Meaning, like, once that somebody teaches you something or you understand something, try to expand that a little bit more and try to understand even more and try to understand the why and try to actually question it if that is something that is it just being done just because it's just part of the practice, and if there's anything that maybe you could add to that to improve it. So that's the one, is really be open to learn and expand on that. I mean, especially the first years, try to be open to expand. I mean, don't be picky on what tasks you get and what tasks you don't at the beginning, especially in your first years. Everything's going to be thrown at you to kind of learn everything. So right now, that's the point that you want to learn, especially when you come from, you're going to be in companies that are like 1 to 20 people. You're going to be wearing a lot of hats, not like corporate, maybe that you're kind of really good at one thing, you're specialized. Here at the beginning is more about learning and really trying to adapt. And that's great because it gives you a whole spectrum of what the whole industry is and what you don't like to do and what you like to do eventually, but at least you get the experience of doing everything right now. Yeah, and then this comes related to the next one. I will say start finding clarity in what you want to do. Companies, everybody wants to get the most out of a career, and that in America is the same as more money. And because of that, it's almost the same as saying I want to be a project manager, because a lot of these small to medium sized companies, most of the time, the places that you're going to get the most money and paid the most is by becoming a project manager or a director. But most of the time, you're not becoming a director because the owner or the principal is the only owner, and then you have project managers. So depending on how your company is structured, those are the two options, let's call it. But just know that sometimes there's other ways, there's other branches out there that you can do. So for instance, me as a consultant, I'm really specialized in BIM. I'm really specialized in doing ArchiCAD and architectural visualization. But lately I've been trying to expand that to more like also AI products and services to these companies and help them understand that within the visualization and productivity aspect. But understand that that's very niche, and understand that you might need to do changes on companies and really start trying to finding the companies that are gonna value those things. So don't feel caught that the only way out is becoming a project manager. And I think that's what I thought it was at the beginning. I thought one of the reasons I wanted to leave architecture was because the only way out I saw was like as a project manager, and I didn't want to do that. But later on, I kind of realized that there are other branches out there that could give me the option to doing the things that I like to do the most of the time. Architecture still, there's gonna be things that I don't love to do, but at least I do most of the things that I really enjoy doing most of the time. And I think it's kind of trying to kind of get clarity on what is that you like to do within that industry, becoming really good at that, and finding that whether your own business or finding that employer that is really gonna help you get those skills to the next level and is gonna appreciate you doing that, and is actually gonna help you expand on that rather than forcing you to go other way. So that's the other one that I have for you. The last two, so just to kind of finalize this, because this video is getting a little long, I would say the third one, it's related to the other ones, is self-development, is always keep learning. Especially now that I have already been 10 years in this career, I've realized that the few people that have in the companies, there has been quite a bit of layoffs, through COVID, or sometimes when there's downturns on a company and all that stuff. And I will say that the majority of the times that there's a layoff normally is because of, I would say, two things. And one is productivity, meaning like I've lost the drive. I had just been not being productive at the office. So at that point, you're just kind of dragging your feet to the office. It's pretty what it's being needed, and that's it. You're not really adding more value to the company. You don't want to take any leadership position. Usually, you're just there to do your job and leave. So something that it's you have to see this as a team. And if you're in a company that you're already not enjoying going, it's better to just change or start looking for other option or start looking for something more challenging within that company. But the moment you start kind of in this limbo where the only thing you enjoy doing is getting out of it, then is when you have to really start asking yourself, why is that happening, right? Is it the career? Is it the company? Is it you? You're just not motivated, and trying to kind of find ways to, like change that. And then the other one is the lack of adding new skills, meaning like I saw a few people in the last 10 years having to get fired just because they were doing the same things that we're doing in the last 20 years, back in 20 years ago, and they just did not want to learn new things, right? Like people that were sketching, they want to sketch. They didn't want to, they manage projects, but they didn't want to learn computer. They didn't want to be drafting or, learning ArchiCAD or Revit or whatever. So that automatically, that attitude of not learning, even in your time where you can, hey, I know the construction part, I know this part, how can I complement it with this? And I know that it might not be, they might not be passionate about it or something, but it just keep adding new skills. And even with the things that you like, there's always new technological advancements that can help those things that you like become a lot more productive. So I'll say always keep learning, always know how to upskill whatever is like you enjoy doing with that industry and become really good at that. And then the last one here, I'll say, and this one is a little tricky, it's always like start finding ways to network with people, because a lot of this industry is really networking and getting to know people. And I know that it's sometimes a little tricky, right? Because it's kind of going to events and having that awkwardness of meeting new people and, giving them your card sometimes, or just being in a spot where you don't know anyone and you're not knowing how to start a conversation or anything like that. So, but something of how I became a really good consultant and found a really good firm was that I didn't do it. Like actually one of my bosses forced me to kind of create these events for ArchiCAD. And that's how I started meeting people that were coming to the events. And from there is where I did the networking. So if it wasn't because someone pushed me to do those, I wouldn't have met that person and build the trust of that team for me to then get these consultant jobs, right, that I have right now. So I think networking is great. Also helps you to be better with people and understanding what's happening in the industry. And in the future, you need clients or you need a job, having already somebody that knows you on that specific company is going to make your qualification a lot faster. Like at that point you might be already qualified. They just, as soon as you say, hey, I want a job, they probably jump to it. So that's the last one I have. So this is just wanted to kind of make a video, kind of give you of where I'm coming from. And next video I will probably do the part 2 where I'm actually giving you a little bit more of what's happening in the architecture industry, what I'm seeing, and how these new technologies have changed it, or how can we change it. But this was just kind of an overview of me, being my 10 years of experience, and give you a little bit of advice. So I hope you guys like it, subscribe, and thank you so much.